All right, hello everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of A Sip of Knowledge with Marty Duffy, Liz Rhoades, and Lou Bryson, plus special guest this week, Dr. Nick Savage, who I will let your host give a more formal introduction to in just a moment. Real quick before I turn things over, I'm Will Hookinga from Zavvy.co. Just want to point out a couple of ways you can interact with Nick and our hosts throughout the presentation. So on your right, you will see a chat box. Feel free to say hello, let us know where you're tuning in from. I already see Christina, Kathleen saying hello. Good to see you both here. If you have a question for Nick or our host at any point throughout the presentation, there's a button at the bottom that says Ask a Question. Just click that, enter your question in there. I'll be keeping an eye on those. And last but not least, feel free to invite your friends to join us. There's a share button that makes that easy at the top. But with all that said, Marty, Liz, Lou, I will turn things over to the three of you now.
Hi, thanks there, Will. You know, I always say where there's a will, there's probably a dead guy. My name is Martin Duffy. I am a former Master of Whisky, senior Master of Whisky, despite my youth. For 14 years with Diageo, 2 glorious years, actually 18 months, with Bacardi as the Benedictine brand ambassador, national, and all the accolades that come with that. And then 8 years as the co-producer of the Chicago Independent Spirit Expo. And for the last 6 years, I have been the sole brand representative of the Glencairn glass. Hello. Oh my God, there's so many of them. Look at them all. Lizard, try to top that, baby. Boom!
Wow.
Somebody's a little manic.
All right. Well, thanks for that, Marty. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Welcome. I'm Liz Rhoades, technical distiller and spirit consultant. Have just over a decade of experience in alcoholic beverage, spanning across a couple different products and substrates, ranging from beer, rum, vodka, but my particular favorite is in the realm of whiskey. Spent most of my career at Diageo, and that's actually why I know Nick here. So Nick, thank you for joining. Good to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely.
But now I'm currently founder and principal at Spirit Safe Consulting. So thanks everyone for joining. Over to Lou.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you. I'm Lou Bryson. I'm a whiskey writer. I was the managing editor at Whiskey Advocate magazine for 20 years. Back on the freelance beat now, I'm a senior drinks writer at the Daily Beast website, and I'm also plugging my latest book, Whiskey Masterclass, which came out in February. Thank you guys. And of course, the Fabulous Tasting Whiskey, which is great introductory text. That's all I got. Marty, you want to?
Lou,
introduce Nick.
I think these are 2 of your best books.
I think they are my best whiskey books. Yeah.
Though I love the one you have about lambs and bears, little animals. I think it's a kid's book. Welcome everybody. Thank you. I see that we have Brad Krause all the way from Panama. I don't know if that's Panama, Florida, or Panama, the country, but either or, south and cool. So thanks. Today we have a very special guest. Again, continuing our international flair. Last week we had Dr. Rachel Berry. Today we have yet another doctor. He has another one who's been a journeyman of sorts, working for many different companies over the years, very different distilleries. 7 years with Diageo, joining the former club here of the three of us.
The alum club.
The alumni, yeah.
Lou's out in the cold on that one. 2 years with William Grant & Sons, 3 years as the Master Distiller of Macallan, up in the Speyside Island regions. And now, all the way south, the most southern distillery in all of Scotland. He is the Master Distiller of Bladnoch everyone, Dr. Nick Savage. Big round of applause.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's good fun. Yeah, happy to do this. It's already good fun. Even before we came online, it was good fun. So this is going to be a good hour or so.
Well, good, because we're going to grill you. There's nothing. Liz has researched your personal background. A lot of dirt there. So, anyways, Nick, this common question we ask everybody. Just kind of give us a brief synopsis of your journey of where you started off and how it led you to where you are now.
Yeah. So I started. I always tell the story starting before I even came into Scotch. I did a PhD all the way back in Australia, and I did a mechanical engineering PhD. Oh. And it was in actually tennis racket dynamics, so it was almost like sports engineering.
Tennis?
Tennis, yeah. Tennis rackets, and then ultimately the question becomes, what's that got to do with whiskey, right? So
I don't know, but it's taking a lot of balls.
So that was in tennis rackets. If you've ever done a PhD, I never want to see another tennis racket ever again. It's good fun, but it's hard work. So I came back and I was looking for roles. I was working in a factory, earning my keep back in Sheffield, and this job came up that they simply just said optimizing whiskey casks, I think, from memory. And my friends, God love them, basically said, well, we all like whiskey, so imagine the perks. So you've got to apply for that job. And that was it, right? Literally.
Better than tennis.
Better than tennis. And, well, they got to come to Australia. So that was their perk for that. That's why I went to Australia. And then they moved me into the whiskey.
You didn't want to get in that tennis stuff that you out of that racket.
I'll do that in retirement. So and that was with Diageo. That was understanding angel share and the life cycle of casks and designing casks. And I was never a whiskey expert, but you're surrounded by it then, and your customers, so to speak, for your work are, my first manager was Jim Beveridge of Walker. So, you're surrounded by knowledge, and you're surrounded by, I might have been doing an engineering role, but you're surrounded by the scientists and the sensory panels, and you have to understand how a cask works and what Jim might have wanted in order to understand how to build it properly. So that's kind of how I entered. And the more you understand whiskey, the more you appreciate it. And that's kind of where you grow from. So I was there for 8 years, did a lot of work obviously in Scotland, but worked with Liz and met Liz in Plainfield in Chicago. And we tried to do a lot of work in kind of the North American whiskies and tried to roll some of that knowledge across. Like you say, 7-8 years, and then went across into William Grant's, and that was the other side of the fence. That was brewing and distilling down in Girvan, 18 months there. And if you're ever going to learn about brewing and distilling, you go to William Grant's in Girvan. It's huge. It's absolutely huge, and a wealth of knowledge. So I learned the complete opposite side of the fence to maturation, the front end. Yeah. And then, I got invited to apply for Master Distiller at Macallan. And everyone at William Grant's, God bless them, actually said, yeah, you go for it. That's once in a lifetime role. And those 3 years were amazing. There's not much we didn't do. When I reflect back, there were so many changes to the brand, the personnel, the structure. All the auction records started to go crazy. All the collectibles started coming out. So much to do, and then you put the cherry on top with the new distillery. That it was a privilege even just to be around that. It was so special. I don't think that'll ever be done again. Then you get invited to again apply for something different, which is a new challenge, completely opposite end of the spectrum in terms of the maturity of a brand. Completely new challenge for me. That's not big corporate. It's been very entrepreneurial, very fast paced, but still got those brand credentials that will make a big brand over the coming years. So I'm sure we'll get stuck into more of that. But that's kind of the journey in a nutshell.
Wow. Well, I mean, see, to me, just looking over that, I mean, you were at Macallan for about 3 years, and Macallan is perhaps it's up there in the pantheon of best known single malt scotches or scotches in general. And you leave that to go work for a smaller distillery, which hasn't had the exposure, and we should get into why it hasn't, even though it's been around since, what, 1817, I believe?
1817, yeah.
Yeah. So it's been around, but obviously it didn't have a lot of, I don't even think it was exported to the U.S. until about
that's correct,
5 years ago, or something like that.
Yep, something like that, yeah.
So, I mean, that's an incredible move. Was it really just, did they offer you a little more freedom or did you see a little more freedom or?
No, let's be honest, that wasn't exactly an easy decision. You're not going to make that decision lightly. There's a lot at stake. And what it boiled down to, me and my wife, Katie, spent a lot of time talking through this. And what it came down to was, Macallan will be Macallan without me. That was a big realization. Although it's an amazing brand, and it's not just a big brand in Scotch, it's a big global brand regardless. Okay? You realize that it's not there because of you. You're helping to support that. Okay, and you look at the 3 years that you've done, and you look at what's been accomplished, and you think, well, I could sit in this chair quite happily for the next 30 years. That's not a problem. Or do we go and challenge myself again? Do we go on another challenge? So you think your Diageo, your Grants, your Macallan, you're kind of going through these S-curves of, I'm going to put some stress on myself. I'm going to learn a lot. It's going to be difficult, but I'm going to take myself to the next level. And that's really what pulled me towards this, which is it's got the 200 years or over 200 years. So it's got that heritage credential. It's got stock. It's got a great vision. It's got the brand credentials in terms of the luxury products and the attention to detail with regards to raw materials. But the challenge for me is it's not at the level of maturity. It's at the beginning of that journey. So I want to challenge myself, and we were going to move fast paced because it's entrepreneurial. We employ 30 people across the globe. We don't employ thousands of people. You all of a sudden work out what that department did because you're doing it all of a sudden, and that's the challenge for me. And I want to be with Bladnoch to go through that S curve of we're entrepreneurial and we're fast paced and it's small and it's a huge growth rate right at the beginning, which is completely different to when you're with a Macallan, different set of circumstances and challenges, both equally challenging. But ultimately that was a decision which was, we want to challenge myself and see if we can survive in this entrepreneurial world, because we were able to do it in the corporate world, so to speak.
I just find that fascinating, the idea that it's a 200-year-old company and it's got 30 employees. There's something really cool about that.
Yeah. Sorry, Liz, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was just saying, and entrepreneurial still, when you think of like an historic company like that it's still that fresh, that that startup.
The way I described it, and if it had been a brand new startup, I wouldn't have done it. It's not got the history, it's not got the credentials. You're going to have to make, spirits in between, and you're not going to be able to hit those price points because you've not got that provenance, so to speak. And I think that would have been an easier decision. But the way I described it, David's got the right vision for it. It is a brand new 200-year-old distillery. That's kind of how I described it as what I'm doing. It's still, it's 1.5 MLA, and it's all pretty much handmade. There's not much automation. Everything's hand cut. Everything's hand moved, which is difficult and costs a lot of money to do. But that's the way that David wanted to do it. So a brand new 200-year-old distillery is the way I kind of pitch it.
Let's go back a little bit, because the if I have my history right, I think this is how I remembered it. It was a distillery that was part of United Distillers up until the 90s. Then it got incorporated in Diageo, and Diageo sold it off to a gentleman or to a group. But with the stipulation, you can make whiskey, you just can't export it, or something to that degree, right? And that was true for a good number of years. I don't know if it was up until when David bought it or it was just prior, but it was only kind of been reintroduced to the world.
Yeah, I think it's never been. So it was sold to the Armstrong brothers at that point, and that's who David purchased from it. it from in 2015, after it had been mothballed since 2009. So there's no production after 2009.
Oh, wow.
Which is part of my challenge of how do you bridge that gap, which is a great, interesting technical challenge that we can get into. But then, yeah, it's never been. It's one of those size distilleries that, if you look at it in a big portfolio, is it worth putting the effort behind because it's only less than 1 million litres, or that type of scale. So therefore, it probably wasn't promoted necessarily as a single malt, so to speak. What David's done is he's purchased it as an independent now. He's got his own brand, and now he's reintroduced it, so to speak, as you said, as a single malt now. Now we can actually tell the story through that single malt brand lens, as opposed to it being not necessarily lost, but not used in that way in amongst a huge portfolio. So I think that's the advantage David's brought, is we're now talking it as a single malt. The reasons why it wasn't done before, that would be my guess as to why I wouldn't necessarily have done it. But I think, it's been, David uses the term reimagined, and I think that's quite right. It's been reimagined as a single malt now.
Oh, I find it I mean, let's see, 203 years.
203 now,
years. That's nuts. How much of the past heritage, did you guys research it, see what has been done over those 2 centuries, and looked at maybe recreating something, or taking something and building upon it?
Exactly. That's kind of my question, is how did that impact the redesign? What were the decisions with that, and how does that play out in the liquid today?
It's a good point, and it's because it was mothballed. It was pretty much needing to be rebuilt. It wasn't necessarily just scrub it down and turn it on. So, like I say, 200-year-old but brand new. I.e., it's all new. It's all new stills, new mash tuns, and new washbacks. However, my predecessor in Macallan did a great job in constructing that and building that to match that old style that they were getting. Okay, so they're not hugely tall, but they are slightly tall stills. We've got that reflux boil on top of the spirit stills. We've got not necessarily old. We've got wooden washbacks, which are new, but they're if you were building a brand new still distillery today, you would build it out of stainless steel with cooling jackets, maybe an external cooler to make sure the efficiencies are, you're getting every last bit. But David didn't want that, and they wanted, no, that's how it would have been done. It's done by hand. That's how we want it. So the washback store is a great point of reference as to that was the inspiration of, we're going to build it as it would be. It still needs to be handmade, even though it's 1.5 MLA, which is slightly big for being handmade. It had to have that traditional feel to it. So although it's new kit, we've managed that similar style, that lowland style that's still coming through. And again, we've got new kit that allows us modern day efficiencies. Then there's a lot more to come through in terms of innovation. I think we want to tell the stories that reach back 200 years. So we'll have to wait and see what happens over the next couple of years. Because all the buildings there are the original buildings, warehousing. We've got a couple of builds that are dating back to the 40s and the 60s, depending on when you go. So old dunnage warehouses on site. There's no racking or anything like that, which again is a limiting factor. We've got to take those. They're problems in modern day distilling at scale. So yeah, we've got to build that. Plus, since David started, what we're able to do is know that we're treating it as a single malt. So the cask types and variability that we lay down, we're laying down, I call it a treasure chest. I'm probably not going to be here when it comes out, 10, 15, 20 years. It's going to be somebody else, and you want them to open the door to a treasure chest rather than everything's bourbon and it's one dimensional. Because ultimately they're in charge of my pension, so I want to give them something to I want to give them loads of stuff to go after. So yeah, it's very much traditional warehouse, traditional production, and that was the inspiration for when they built it.
So traditional dunnage warehouse, what's the construction? Stone or wood or?
No, brick. So it's brick buildings with roofing on there, but very damp, very dark, very humid. However, in the summertime, it flips to being ultra hot. So the warehousemen are either in 3 jackets and a beanie, or they're in shorts and t-shirts,
Right.
sweating. It's ridiculous. So yeah, it can get pretty hot in there.
Well, wait a minute. When you say pretty hot, I mean, are we
Well,
talking
yeah.
hot?
Where are you?
For Scotland.
For Scotland, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Well, I mean, if you, I mean, it's
almost
not
room temperature.
Yeah, I can almost take my gloves off. I mean, it's not a Kentucky warehouse at the top, right? It's not going to be level 8 in a Kentucky warehouse, but it's still the top of a warehouse, and it's still, got the sun on the top couple of levels, and the roof's absorbing, it's heating that headspace up, so it's still fairly warm, and pushing casks around there, a couple of hundred casks a day, that's going to get you pretty worn out.
And how
That
close
was, that
to the
was
ocean?
something else I wanted to, roughly how many casks are in one of these?
So there's a couple of sizes, anywhere ranging between 3,000 to 5,000 in one of those. But the limited, I mean, we've got, Neil, our distillery manager, he's got the difficulty of, I want to lay the treasure chest down, but that's lots of different cask sizes and movements. Neil would like it. Give me all one cask size, and it's nice and neat, and fine. Because it is actually, you've got probably 4 high in bourbon and 2 high in sherries, and that's actually a lot. You can't really stack them high. Again, it costs a lot of money to do it, and it's limiting. But that's the principles of the brand, really.
And Nick, your background, I mean, when you were at Diageo, you were into cask research, were you not?
That's right, yeah.
How is that going to come into play with the whiskey you're making? And are you going to seek out new casks and different types of wood and different life forms?
Sure.
I thought it was Star Trek.
Life forms, maybe not. I'm quite sure where that one came from. Yes, I think
just Star Trek.
It's yes, there's a lot, and I've learned a lot, from that Diageo piece, but also from Grant's and at my time at Macallan. But learning about the impact of previous fills versus the impact of the oak species. All right, there's a lot of it's ex sherry or it's ex port. Actually, and it does have a difference. The more notable difference is for me the different oak types: Quercus robur, Quercus alba, American oak, or North America versus European versus Spanish versus Japanese or Australian. So what I'm trying to do is not necessarily seek out things so as I can write them on a label. Seek out things that make an impact. Because I could probably give you 2 whiskies that I could write completely different things on a label, but taste exactly the same. So and I don't really think that's right. I find that as a tough sell. If I've got to stand here and tell you how to taste it, I don't think that's right. So there should be a palpable difference. And for me, the main difference starts to come from oak species. I think that for me, that combined then with the toasting times, temperatures, the coopering process. And then you're into the previous fill and the impact of that on the wood. When you taste a sherry cask, great example is when you taste a sherry cask finished or matured, you're not tasting sherry. It's not as if you've got whiskey and poured sherry, and that would taste completely different. Right. The sherry tastes like the wood, and the whiskey tastes like the sherry wood, if that makes sense. So they both taste like similar wood. Because if you put sherry into whiskey, it tastes completely different. So for me, the impact of that oak type and species and region, toasting and coopering processes, and then that previous fill, so to speak, would be my order of play. Plus, then you lay into, before we started, you started to talk about different distilleries, all essentially the same materials, but come out with completely different things. Yeah. If you think about how many variables go into it, plus the length of time, you might have got all the different barley varieties, all the different fermentations, yeast, mashing times, spirit, still designs, cooling, cut points, oak type, oak species, previous fills. Throw all that into the mix, it's probably 200 variables. Plus the 10 people that worked on all that at different points, plus 15 years. Who knows what's going to come out? And that's half the fun.
Mixed bag, isn't it? Yeah, I just want to point out that, I mentioned Brad Krause from Panama. He's actually from Panama, the country, and Nick, he is a fellow master distiller at the Pedro Mendinga Rum Distillery. So I'm sure he's
Send me some casks, Brad. We'll
Yeah,
sort
some rum,
There you go.
rum cast finished in the
Maybe
future.
we can do some. Forget these. So maybe we can leave your price in the chat, Brad. That's fine.
Right, yeah, let's make a
hands
deal.
across the
Maybe we can do a deal. We can do a live deal.
hands across the hey Nick, I was wondering. So how
Actually,
close?
I'm sorry. Can I?
Yeah.
I want to follow up on something we were just talking about. If that's all right.
No,
Okay,
go ahead, Lou.
Thank you. I love you.
Who's the worst?
The thing you were talking about with getting more difference from the actual wood than the previous fill, that was something I was not familiar with. It was one of the things I learned while I was writing this book. It is the thing that I've had the most pushback on. Drinkers just, they don't even want to hear that. Because it just, I don't know, I guess it seems, non-intuitive to them? That they think the sherry must be influencing the whiskey.
Yeah, and Liz will back me up on this. It's probably too much of a geeky answer.
Yeah,
No, that's probably what it is. It's probably
it's conceptually,
yeah.
I think hard to wrap your head around as a consumer without like physically deep diving into all those levers that you discussed. That's from my perspective too. I just think that saying sherry finished, like, oh, it's going to be sweeter or something like that.
Exactly, And
it
it can be because you've used a different wood, so it's still valid to say that. I think when we're talking at the distillery, and we're talking about the tours and the script for the tours, or when we're talking about the brand, and I just described what I'm drinking here, the bourbon and red wine, and we'll talk about the stills and the lowland style, and it's grassy and it's floral and it's sweet. Us on screen, we kind of get that because we're in amongst it. 99% of the people don't even know what a still is or what a cask is. Yet we're talking, most people don't go into that level of detail. The guys who you're talking to, they're in that 1%. 1% of the whiskey drinkers. So that they'll get it. It's just tough when all visitors come and they're coming to visit a nice distillery, and we start off talking this cask type and this oak type, and they're like, hold on a minute, what's a cask? Let's start there first. So we sometimes just run ahead and assume that because we talked about it on a day-to-day basis, everybody else is just there, and I think that's unfair a lot of the time. We should slow down.
Not to plug on the books, but when I read the first book, that's what the publisher wanted me to write. The publisher wanted this book. And I'm like, it must be because this was in 2012 when we were talking about it. Things were they weren't just getting started, but most of the people who were drinking whiskey, like you said, didn't even know what a still was.
Yeah, and it's not a dispute. We're doing that with our branding. We're doing that with our branding right now. And if you grab a bottle, I've not got one. That's an older one. But if you've got a newer bottle, what we're trying to do is, we do no age statements, and what's that? And that's not as good as an age statement.
Of course.
Right, okay. And what do you enjoy it? Yes. Well, that's okay.
Yeah.
Does it matter? Does it matter? Right? And I think I'm being slightly flippant, and I think when we described the oak type, and I even went to Quercus Rober and Alba like that just then. Who's gonna? Unless you understand tree species it's not fair. So what we're trying to do is, regardless of age or no age or character led, as I call it, because no age infers that you're missing something. I don't think that's fair. We're trying to describe, regardless of the age or the cask type, I try to distill our tasting notes down to 3 words, and then we'll display them. That's it. So anybody can then say, here I think I've described this as vanilla, cherries, and sweetness. If you like those 3 things, whether it's 11 or 25 or character led, you're probably going to like it. And if you don't, then I'd rather you didn't buy it. I'd rather you buy the one that I've described as raisins, cinnamon, and spices, right? And try and really describe the experience in the glass as opposed to the credentials. Credentials are important, but I'm more interested in the experience that everyone has. And I think the way I describe it is things like, the Nespresso pods.
Yeah.
You don't need to know anything about coffee to go, I'll have the green pod because I like it. It's very quick. And I think that's kind of where my head's at for how we try and describe what's in the bottle, not just the age and cast type.
Well, we've had this thing over here for such a long time. I mean, well, it seems like a long time, where everybody needs to know everything that goes into making whiskey. When it boils down to, again, the thing is, they'll turn against the whiskey that they loved once they find out, oh, wait a minute, that's sourced? I hate that. That's the worst. You know?
I had a great time on it. I drank half a bottle before I realized that.
Ignorance
And then
is
it
bliss.
turned on me.
It's like the people who've been eating Keebler cookies all these years, and then they find out the elves weren't making it in a hollow tree, and they get all upset. They go, wait a minute, this is made by normal people? It's so weird to me that they get so upset about this stuff.
So, yeah, just like going back to kind of what you said, Nick, about kind of streamlining and simplifying into a very consumable messaging, and maybe Lou, you'll chime in, but I feel like there's sort of the camps of the power of suggestion with talking to consumers, but also kind of it's insulting a little bit when there's very elaborate tasting notes, because I feel like you're projecting, or like you should be tasting this, and if you're not, well, that's probably not, or it's just no, well, I taste this, and it's almost like you're allowing the consumer, because I mean sensory, right, is a very subjective thing. You're allowing them to elaborate on sort of like, here's a neat little package of the key components, if, like you said, if you like this, then try it, but also allowing them to have their own experience, which I think is really interesting. And I don't know, Lou, like your experience with in some of these
describes it as the difference between descriptive and prescriptive. Descriptive, I'm telling you what I taste. Prescriptive, I'm telling you what you should taste. And that's first, where's the fun in that? And second, I don't know what's in your mouth.
It's referred to as the Jedi mind trick. That's really what it is. You are telling someone you are now tasting bananas.
I am.
With a hint of cracked pepper. Don't forget that.
Oh, salt on it. I don't even know what pepper, but I can taste salt on it.
It's a good point, Liz, and I do that. Sometimes I have fun with tastings, and I'll be.
Well, you just screw with them?
Oh yeah, but I do it to prove a point. So I'll be doing a tasting of, I can get vanilla pods and dark cherries with a little bit of bacon and a little bit of dried cinnamon, something like that. And everyone in the room starts going, I get bacon too. I'm going, guys, no. I threw it in there just because they're on the, right? But the point, and then I'll say to you, I'm just saying these words because that's what I can describe. But I'm just there to almost be provocative, to give you words in your head to start describing what you're tasting. Because who am I to tell you how it's tasting? That's not my. I can write tasting notes simply to be provocative to what you're thinking of. We're just quite okay at describing what we're nosing. And again, a lot of people they can pick the smell off, but they can't describe it. And you build that up with skill over time. And I think you're right, Liz. The way I try to do things is there's two questions. One is the tasting notes, which is who am I to tell you what it tastes like? And if you don't like it, then don't drink it. That's perfectly valid to say I don't like this, and that's not insulting to us. Simply saying I just don't like that. The other one is how should I drink it? My response is, as long as you don't throw Coke on top of it, you drink it however you like it. Again, who am I to tell you how to drink it?
I tell people, drink it in your underwear. Not to your own home, hopefully.
Experiential.
Well,
How experiential.
When I used to do staff trainings, I used to do hundreds of staff trainings. I got tired of people shouting out their tasting notes, because then everybody else said, yeah. No one wanted to look like the dummy. So
yeah, exactly.
Picking up walnuts or the feet of the Statue of Liberty, they everyone had to say, yeah, I'm picking that up too. I've never been to the Statue of Liberty, but yeah, I'm picking that up.
I feel like that's...
And I would
That's
tell
what it would smell like.
That's what it would smell like. Yeah.
Write them out.
Bird poop.
Those are your... Keep those secret. Those are your notes. Just write it out.
Yeah. But sometimes I set the scene on like an online. I've done lots of online tastings, and I'll pause after everyone and just get people. I want to see what your tasting comments are, because you might be getting something different, and I want to be inspired. So people will just write their nose taste, and it starts a good conversation out. But don't necessarily, like you say, be driven. I preface that with saying they're your tasting notes, and what if you don't agree with what I'm saying? That doesn't mean I'm right or wrong. Doesn't mean you're right or wrong. That's just how you're tasting it. And write it. That's part of the fun.
Now, Nick, I've just read recently, I think it was just in September, there's an article about a program that you have, or I don't know if it's still going on, the Cask program.
Sure.
Can you tell us a little more about that?
Sure. So it's in its infancy. From a COVID perspective, let's put it right. COVID's turned the world upside down, but that doesn't mean we stop. It's difficult to do a cask program because people can't come to the distillery. All right. But what we're trying to do is there's a limited amount of casks that we'll offer that's Bladnoch fillings. Okay. And they will come forward and it's by referral only. And what will happen is David our owner, he will sign off and say, these are the people who should be getting these 12 casks. There's a waiting list. And what that does is say, we're going to work with you. We're going to bring you to the distillery. We're going to spend 3 hours with myself in the sample room, all the different cask types, all the different ages, trying to work out what you like, what you don't like. And then we can select a cask that we can fill with Bladnoch for yourself. We will then follow that. You'll then own that cask, but we'll follow that for the 12 years. You can come back to all the events. You can come back twice a year, whatever you want to do. Every other year, maybe every 3 years, perhaps, depending on how often everyone wants to sample it. We'll sample the cask. How's it progressing? Are you happy with it? So it's a real immersive experience over 12 years. Now, you get a cask, right? For me, I when I'm speaking to people who are interested, it's not really about the cask is the end product. It's the journey, it's the experience over 12 years and how much you're going to learn about whiskey. All the things that we spoke about today, all the different distilling pieces, all the different wood types, sherry types or bourbon type, whatever it might be, you're immersed in that. You're there at the sample table with myself, discussing and working out all your specific whiskeys. So it'd be great to hear people's interest on that. And I think it was it the RAB report that you're referring to? So again, people will be able to get that and they can click and find out more information on it. But really looking forward to working with some people on their particular Bladnoch. That's quite exciting.
That is posted. That article is posted on our Sip of Knowledge Facebook.
That's right. Yeah.
Event page. So please visit it. Read all about it. Boom.
There's actually a link below to the Bladnoch website. Yeah. Thanks.
I don't know what point I was.
So you could also check that out and probably learn more about that as well.
Loads of things on there.
That sounds I like the way you do that. That's not unusual. Usually it's these are done. Which one do you want?
No, it's far more bespoke. No, we're not going to give you the keys to the treasure chest. It's the experience. It's understanding.
Just start rummaging through.
I love that one. But you're also part of lots of people do cast. And we're hoping that actually, if you're a fan of Bladnoch and you like the concept of the treasure chest, you like the attention to detail and all the high quality materials we use, you like the branding. Therefore, you should be a brand ambassador and come on that private cask journey with us. You're the right type of person that's going to love that, and that's kind of that's the kind of people we want to invite with us over the next 10, 15 years.
Oh, that's cool.
It's a very powerful experience.
Yeah.
with Bladnoch, where geographically? Now I know it's in the south west of Scotland.
Right.
But how close are you to the ocean, and do you feel that has any effect on your maturation?
We're very close to the ocean. I mean, my commute is amazing. I live at a place called Castle Douglas, and it's about a 45, 50-minute drive.
Douglas.
Castle Douglas. It's the food capital of Scotland, I'm led to believe. But my commute is basically along the beach, roughly all the way along that coastline, through some hills.
Sounds terrible.
And it's not very good on a rainy day, I'll be honest. It's fairly close to the cliff edge most of the time. So fairly close. We're probably, again, from our house, you're probably 2.5 hours, and we've caught the ferry across to Ireland. So we're in that belt that joins or southwest Scotland to Ireland. The warehouse location. If you go back to the casks, and I was talking about oak type, and then previous fill, and then probably strength after that, and so on and so forth, and toasting times and temperatures. That's where I got to. Then you look at the impact of maturation. I would say the location probably comes second below the type of warehousing. So you've got high racked, you've got palletized, you've got dunnage. They would probably have the most effect, and then you're moving into location and various other things. We don't absorb the salt from the sea. We don't really see that coming through.
So how would you say though the difference between when you're working at Macallan up in the Speyside region, and then you have you're down in the lowlands? I mean, there used to be that whole regional effect, right? Everyone talked about, and some of that's kind of gone the way of the dodo bird. But at the same time, what has been your experience so far?
So, I mean, it is a different geography. It is further north. It's cooler up there. It's wetter up there. Which, if you can piece one cask that's been in Speyside and one cask that's been in the lowlands, and how do they perform, you might be able to pick off a difference. And as it gets blended away, so to speak, then you probably lose that. But it's not as extreme as the difference between Gimli and Kentucky, right? We've got differences, but sorry, the reference there that everyone doesn't get: Canada and Kentucky, right?
Yeah.
The reference. One's snowy and cold, and one's really hot, and it
can vary.
Pretty
yeah.
hot. I think one of the big differences could be, specifically in Scotland, the difference between north and south is a lot smaller than that difference geographically in North America. The difference between the top and the bottom of a warehouse is going to have a big impact. The top two layers in a palletized warehouse or a racked warehouse are going to be significantly warmer than the bottom 4 or 5, especially in summertime. So I think you would probably see more of a difference between the top and the bottom of a warehouse in terms of if you could get the identical casks.
Yeah, but what day is summertime?
Right, if you could get the identical casks.
It was last if you can get the identical casks.
Yeah, I was waiting for that.
Yeah. Summertime was last Wednesday.
Yeah.
Afternoon. PM.
Nick, I'm going to end here with my last very technical question. So bringing it back a little bit upstream in the process, I noticed, on the website, you specifically call out an 80-hour fermentation time frame, which is a little bit longer than the typical 72-hour. Since you're in the wooden fermenters, was that a conscious decision in terms of to try and get a little bit of more bacteria sort of development to kind of develop that estery flavor profile, or was there you just landed on 80 for other technical reasons? Just kind of curious.
Kind of anywhere between 60 and 80 kind of hits that. It hits that ester production that supports the lowland style that we then really get in the stills. You don't really, it's not 120 plus fermentation that you get a massive impact from. You're really getting that differentiation in the stills and in the cut points. and that's where we get that lowland style from. We've got shell and tube condensers. They're not worm tubs, so it's a nice light fruity style with a hint of grassiness, is how I describe it. So the interesting thing about the washbacks though is we get seasonal variation on efficiencies, purely because of the fact if it's warm outside, all we can do is deck it lower. And then you're into, and this is the interesting stuff when you come on tour. You find out that obviously in summertime, and we had a warm some of this, but the temperature of the river goes up. Our Lade went up to 20 degrees, and if that's your water source to cool your wort down to 17, well, it's physically impossible. All you can do is cool it to 20 degrees. Yeah. So so it starts at 20 and it's just going to rocket to 33, 34. Yeah. So summertime and wintertime, you get that variability, and we just have to work with the elements. Yeah. So people don't really think of that. Well, the river's warming up, therefore, the river warms up, and your spirit character can change because you can't keep your condensers cool enough. And it's those types of things that you have to manage when you're doing it at this type of craft scale.
Yeah.
Now you're down in the fertile lowlands. Are you sourcing your grain locally, and if so, I'm sure there's geeks out there want to know what strain of barley are you using? What farm and what corner of the farm?
What corner of the farm?
Yeah, latitude, longitude.
Longitude.
And are there squirrels?
And did Fred harvest it this year, or was it Dougie?
Steve Jr.
See, Steve never cuts a straight line. That's just the problem.
He zigzags.
Yeah, but he's wacky. It's good fun. It's good.
All right.
So, where are we at? There's a lot within that one. We work exclusively at the moment with Simpson's Malt, and we've secured our next harvest next year. So I think what we're talking about is using things like blockchain technology, and we can pinpoint which field it came to already. Okay, yeah. But we're not really. And for each batch, for each delivery, we can say which bin it came from. Through everything that Simpsons provide us, we can track it all the way back to the field. But what we're trying to do going forward is actually work closer with farmers, and actually work with a group of farmers that simply, these are the Bladnoch fields. That's what we'd like to get to. We're not there yet with it. So we can do this all again next year, and I can update you on that. That takes a bit of work to work. Who are the farmers? Where is the land? And so as we can have that full traceability back to the field, back to the farmers, and also bring that into the farmers into part of the process. As soon as you link them to the distillery, they get very engaged, and they really feel a purpose of this is where my malt goes, where my barley goes, should I say. And I can see it, and it ends up in the bottle. That's really engaged, and I think that's important going forward, especially for a distillery outside.
And, so a number of years ago, I was at a World Whisky Conference where one of your former compatriots, one of your former associates, Dr. Nick Morgan, another doctor, gave a really interesting talk about how the Scotch industry has kind of painted itself into a corner as far as innovation. And you see them trying to, find different ways to maybe break out of it as opposed to the rules. But at the same time, a lot of people want tradition. So where do you see that? Do you find that there are ways to innovate other than, say, types of wood? Are there other ways to innovate with Scotch whiskey, especially at a distillery that you're playing, that you're free to do such innovations if they're available?
So it's a good question.
Yeah, I know. Boom.
I might have to put myself on a I might have to put myself on a dram to answer. One of the other bits about coming to Bladnoch specifically for me was the story's not been told. Okay, so we've not shown the stocks. That's not happened. there's lots of stories to be told, or right up to when David bought it, or all the foreign bottlings and everything that happened is not widely known. So there's lots of fruit there to go out and tell those stories. The trouble is, once you've told those stories, what do you do? And I think that's where Nick would have been talking. Where do you go now? Because when you look at things such as when you look at the SWA Act, it kind of puts some handcuffs on you, and that's how some people see that. I don't. I think that is a challenge. How do we still keep that tradition and live within that protection? Because as soon as that protection's gone, it's gone. There's a reason it's worth a lot of money, and I think it's important that we protect that, and we work within that. And some of the work and innovation stuff that we did at Diageo, we had to go and pitch and we had to speak to the legal team. Is this right? Is it wrong? As long as you're engaging and it's progressing the industry and Scotch as a whole. I'm talking Scotch here, by the way, not whiskey in general. They're normally engaging and you can normally run with it. But then I think it's up to us to then think differently. So yes, we can only use an oak cask of no more than 700 litres and so on and so forth. Doesn't say which oak type it's got to be. Doesn't say what shape it's got to be. Doesn't say, And I think what you see when you look at some of the cooperages, they're thinking a level just below that. How can we innovate? And that a lot of work's been done on toasting times, temperatures. So if you simply add 5 different toasting times and temperatures with 3 different oak types, you've all of a sudden got a load of variability. It doesn't say you can't use different yeast. It doesn't say you can't do X amount of hours fermentation. So I think when you look at the parameters, there's still always room to innovate and go searching for things. Go be inspired by what they do in Kentucky or what they do in Japan with their whiskies, and bring that information back and build it. One of the difficulties, though, is, I just said toasting times and temperatures. I'm at it again. If I've innovated with toasting times and temperatures, then that's my USP for this product. I've just assumed everybody knows what a cask is again. How do I communicate that at a level that everybody can relate to? That's always the difficulty when you're trying to innovate right at the edge of the regulations. That's the difficulty.
Yeah. I think with that, we've seen a little bit of that startup here in the States. Innovation with different toasting regimes, for example, and the way that I've seen it recently is talking about, versus like, we've toasted at XYZ temperature for X, minutes, and it's more about, it's, I guess, a little bit back to the tasting notes, but I've seen it be communicated to like high vanillin or something like that, where it's a little bit more, back to the previous conversation, it's a little bit more chewable for a consumer to wrap their head around versus the super, geeky, here's the DOE that we did to come up with, this specific.
What's been the impact of that innovation is probably the best way to describe it. Like you say, it's more chewy or it's ultra peaty, smoky. Again, we assume that people know what peat is sometimes in certain parts of the world. What's a peat? So we assume quite a lot, and I don't think it's fair sometimes. You're right. If you can relate the technology back to the experience, that's probably the key bit. And then once they appreciate, I'm tasting it being more chewier, then you can start to elaborate on how we've accomplished this.
Right.
You got to give Scotch credit for getting people to know what peat is. I grew up in the city my entire life, and I never dealt with peat other than humans named Pete. So it's funny that there's so many people go, oh my God, I love this whiskey. It's very peaty.
But even peaty is a style of the whiskey, and you've got to be careful with it in terms of describing it. Yeah. So some of my descriptors, I flippantly use the word Christmas cake a lot. A lot of places wouldn't. What's Christmas cake? So I'm trying to describe it in a different.
Jewish
they don't even know.
A lot of Jewish people are looking at you weird.
That's it.
Talking about
which is why I use fruitcake now. I use fruitcake.
Nice. That's a great British baking show. You're like, what does that
Exactly.
even taste like? Like Jaffa cake or whatever.
Like Jaffa
I'm like,
cake,
what is that?
Licorice
Well,
sticks.
marzipan was another one that I had to go out and buy some, search
it
out
up.
Do you
marzipan.
not know what marzipan was? Is that-
I
Really?
didn't know, not originally. That's not something that.
John Hansel and I were in Scotland together. We went to Aberlour and we went to a shop, a provisions shop.
A concession, yeah.
Yeah, and we went in there and he just started buying all the stuff
Marzipan.
that guys from Scotland used to describe whiskeys that we didn't know what the hell they were.
Yeah,
They were set by the Spain, like,
Sensory training session.
yeah, exactly.
If you go to Budapest and then go down the Danube about 10 miles, a friend of mine brought me to this little village. There's the Marzipan Museum.
oh my
Where
God.
they have a life-size statue of Michael Jackson made out of marzipan. And the Budapest Castle, all in marzipan. Everything's in
Nice.
marzipan. The weirdest little museum.
Wow.
Smells delicious, though.
I bet. Yeah.
So speaking of innovation,
Is that what that was? Is that what that was?
Were we?
yeah, my attempt to bring it back.
Bring it back, Liz.
So it seemed like there was some sort of one-off innovation happening with an Australian bar. How did that come about, and is that something just specifically because of the ties back to Australia? Are you doing other programs like that?
So we do. So there's a couple of things to watch out for at Bladnoch. Obviously, we've got the private cask experience, and that's very high end, so to speak. What we've got is how do you let people know about your brand? How do you grow your brands and your business with very limited stock? Bladnoch. When we say Bladnoch is rare, it is rare. The 11-year-old will be very, very limited to the fact that we can actually put on 2020 release and not have to worry about write-off of labels. We can just bottle it to the allocation. That's as much as we're getting. So it is very rare. And how do you grow your brand when you've only got that amount of stock? So we look towards things like single casks, where we've got a single cask program every year. I've selected 5 casks for the next 5 years, and we'll release them 5 at a time. And within those casks, you've got a plethora of bourbon casks. I think so there was an Oloroso cask, red wine cask. So each year, people could buy the 5 casks, understand the brand, understand the liquid and what it does and the differences. Very limited, obviously, they're single casks, but you can tell more stories very quickly, and I think that's important. On top of that, what we've got is what we call select casks, and that is how we collaborate with some of our top partners. And I think the one that you're referring to, there's 2. There was the Boilermaker House, which was an on-trade collaboration, and we've just done one with the Whisky Club in Australia as well. And basically, that is a single cask that we select on their behalf to say, you've supported us, you've gone with us, we want to collaborate with you. This will be exclusively available through your outlets, and we can work with you to tell that exclusive story. So the Whisky Club and the Boilermaker had 2 different casks. We were able to tell 2 different stories, and hopefully collaborate with people who were with us on this journey. And that's where the single casks, which is the white bottles that you'll see, and then there's the select casks, which are almost a collaboration with our top partners.
Okay, really cool.
And if you can find them, they're like unicorn dust.
Okay.
I have a whole bucket of unicorn dust.
You got a case behind you.
So by the way, I don't know if you noticed this, but Brad from Panama said, "Let's trade." So there you go.
Let's make a deal.
Brad.
And then Kathleen asks, she would like to learn more about the blockchain technology, which is a horror film, I think, also in brewing and distilling. Can we have a future session on this new technology? Oh, I guess that's asking us.
That's for us, It's not necessarily for Nick.
Yeah.
Sure.
Unless he wants to come back to talk about it.
I'll watch that one.
Yes, I'm volunteering Nick to come back and
You should get a Bitcoin expert on it. It's the same technology as Bitcoin. I'm glad to believe. So they're way more interested than me.
So, I mean, are you happy at the new distillery? Because you've been there just a little over a year. It's been a year and 3 months?
3-4 months, yeah. It feels like 4 years. Purely for the, I mean, we did every year we shut down, obviously, distillery shut down, and we did that in July, end of July. And we have a summer shutdown update to the team and see how the business is doing. Everyone's focusing on the right things, and everyone enjoy your holiday and come back. When I reflected on that and actually wrote down what had happened in that first year, right? I joined, and then within 3 weeks, the guys had opened the visitor center, right? Which is an achievement in itself. I had nothing to do with that. The guys had already done that. Another couple of weeks later, we opened the cafe. Right, in amongst all this, I've got to assess all the stock, so I've nosed every cask on site now. A couple of weeks later from that, we welcomed Prince Charles on site to open the new visitor centre, right? So you've got a royal visit come through the distillery, which if you've ever been part of something like that, that's something to, that's not hello and welcome. That takes a lot of planning. So Prince Charles and Lady Camilla came through, and then everything was going great, and then bushfires happened in Australia. Remember that?
Oh yeah,
right. And that's key for us because we're Australian owned, so that was important to us. And then we were gearing up for a great season, and then smite COVID comes around.
Oh Jesus Christ!
Throughout all that, we've launched our e-commerce site. We've launched our single cask range. We've launched 11, 14. We've got about 4 more to come in the first half of next year. We've got the private cask experience. And I just wrote all this down, and I thought, geez, that would have taken me 5 years to do in previous worlds. And this might, remember, we'll go back to why we did this, the challenge of working in that entrepreneurial high-paced world. I'll be honest, in the first part of it, it was slightly unnerving. Because I'm sat here going, surely I need to check with more people to make sure we're doing the right thing. And to David's credit, David's excellent at that. Gives you confidence. Yeah, this is right. Just go do it. Go do it. And it's working out well, and really enjoying that challenge. And that's what I came for. That's why I'm doing it. So the reason for doing it is coming to fruition now.
Well, the other thing I thought about, and we talked about this a little earlier, but you master distillers are kind of like, I compare you to NFL coaches, that when you move from distillery to distillery, you have to move. You have to move. Because I think you were saying it's a 6-hour difference, distance between where you were at Macallan and now down at Bladnoch. If you get another gig, you got to uplift the family and go somewhere else. I mean, don't you want to just be in one place for maybe about 20 years?
I mean, it depends on the master distiller role. So my role is master distiller and head of operations. So I have to be involved with the operations side of things, and working with Neil and the team, working with the brand side of things. Some roles aren't necessarily based at the distillery. Mine is. Now you're right. What happens? Now I think I'm probably out of moves and out of favor with my wife. If I was to do that again, I'll probably. This is the last one, right? I'm out of brownie points on that front. But there's never ever been a rationale to move away. It's always been moving towards something. So you're always open to conversations, but provided you're happy and it's all fun, you don't need to move. It's not a lucky. I'm always looking for the next thing. That's never ever the rationale. It's always, this could be interesting. Let's go on this journey now. Let's try this out. And that, to be fair, that's actually my dad. My dad told me that once. He said, you'll never know what's going to happen. And the way he did his career was always going, yeah, that looks interesting. I'll go try that for a bit. And and he had fun. And I think that's the right approach to it.
You can go work with Brad down in Panama.
We'll switch for summertime. You can come for Scottish summertime, and I'll go for Panama.
That could be a good TV show. Distillers from completely different
It's a
parts of the
distillery
world.
swap.
Distiller swap.
Yeah, exactly. Distiller swap. That's right.
Awesome.
What was the? What was it? Yeah, there was something else in my mind that I was thinking.
Can't help you on that.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it's a scary,
It's a word.
scary.
It's like
place to
tasting
be.
notes. I can't tell you what you're tasting. I can't tell you what
Wait,
you're
I can make you think what you were thinking.
I can give you a question.
You were
if you want.
thinking about cracked black
Yeah.
pepper.
Questions rattle around in my mind like
And bacon and
And bacon.
and bacon, yeah.
trying to make it settle in. I mean, now here's something. As a master, and you got a freaking title too. Oh, this is also something. Nick Savage. Again,
Hello.
if there's anyone out there who does comic books, this is a perfect. He's a distiller by day. At night, he's Dr. Savage. You go around, and I don't know, you fight off whiskey angels or something.
Exactly,
There
yeah.
you
Fight
go,
Whiskey Angels or
yeah.
something.
That's your real name.
Yeah, it's not a stage name, no. It's my real name.
I mean, it's a really good name. It's a great name. It's
However, I might, after this conversation, come up with a stage name. That might be quite...
You do
Hey,
cool.
remember what
Yeah.
his boss's name was. I mean, he worked for Jim Beveridge.
I know.
Another great name.
Yep.
Yeah.
He was destined to work with whiskey, actually.
Yeah.
It's like some guy comes along. Hi, I'm Sam Whiskey. Real name. Sam Whiskey.
Yeah. Easy decision.
It doesn't quite sound like a superhero, though, Sam Whiskey, does it?
Sam Whiskey does not know.
It's not got the same ring to it. No.
There was a Burt Reynolds movie called Sam Whiskey. If
It
that,
kind of sounds like
Know
a
where that came
well
from?
whiskey
well,
or
yeah.
something. Yeah.
well,
The bottom
that was a Western.
shelf.
It was a Western. Sam Whiskey. Burt Reynolds.
Brad is replying back, and he said he's made a little whiskey here. I also have a brewery, so that's exciting.
Whoa, both Lou and hey, here's an idea for you. In the age of COVID, Liz is currently over on the East Coast. We can't say where, but I think if she rents a boat, sails it across to Scotland, you load it up with whiskey, and she can hand deliver it. Brand new program. She hand delivers the whiskey.
It's a part of the distiller swap program.
Yeah, exactly. And you thought there was no room to innovate, right? You thought innovation was dead.
Look at all the ground we've covered, and it's only been an hour.
Let's push it over the side, 3 miles away from shore.
Yeah,
There you
it's
go.
10 years worth of
Loaded
innovation, no?
That's right. There could be a big ship. Well, what's international waters here? They used to do that in Prohibition days. They used to have those booze cruises out in international waters where people go and drink legally.
Yeah.
Liz can take to a distillery on a large boat. I'm just throwing these out there for you guys. Like Leif's.
You did see the guy that ate.
I'm going to write these down
on the barge and it was in the Mississippi. Yeah,
Exactly.
It's up there with the sea aged.
Sea aged, yeah.
Jefferson. Yeah.
Sea matured. There you go.
Sea matured.
I'm sure we could put a cask on the boat and you could sail it back, and it wouldn't be Scotch anymore, but I'm sure we could do something with it.
Oh, that's right.
Right. Have it jostle around a bit.
So Jefferson's whiskey, Jefferson's bourbon did that, where they sailed the
They
whiskey
still
around.
do.
But you can't do that in Scotland with a Scotch because
Not being aged in Scotland.
It's going to be on in Scotland, yeah. And we can't rename a town Scotland and sail it to it.
The boat is called Scotland.
The boat can be called Scotland. The boat's called Scotland.
Pay Calmac to put a small warehouse in the back of the
I can feel the lawyers.
Yeah.
There's no icebergs attached to Scotland. You can't break it off. Just build a little warehouse.
Real estate here.
It's been really great, Nick.
I mean, when I said what are we going to talk about, Liz, you said let's do some preparation. I mean, I'd love to. This is fun. No, it's not. I'd love to come back. This is good fun.
Well,
I'll stay
we're
like
glad
that.
you've enjoyed it. We've enjoyed it.
Hope so.
Thank you so much for joining.
You're welcome.
Really quickly, wanted to just talk about our guest for next week. So we have Marianne Eves joining us. So really excited to have her on next week. So be sure to look out for that on Zavvy to get yourself signed up. And it sounds like there's a registration link in the chat. So there you go.
Will's on top of it, man.
And Nick, do you enjoy your complimentary, personalized Glencairn glasses?
Very much so.
Of a sip of knowledge. Lou paid for him himself. And then he doesn't know it yet. But yeah. And Lou's going to send you over 50 copies.
Yes, looking forward to 50 copies of those.
All
we can
signed.
get those selling in the visitor centre as a signed copy. No problem.
And
There you go.
Put it on the boat.
Put it on the
check
boat.
out page 261, acknowledgements.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for joining. Really appreciate it. Thanks again, Nick. It was a pleasure catching up and
Thank you, guys.
just learning about Bladnoch. So
Hope
awesome.
to get down there.
Very interesting.
I'm going to
You're
try to
welcome.
get down there next time
You're
I
all
go.
welcome.
To
Next time
Glencairn.
you're across.
Yeah.
Drop me a note, and everyone's welcome when the world is safer again.
And do that.
God
Yep.
bless.
Awesome. Thanks. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye.